What line from a book hit you so hard that it made you cry? I've seen so many young men over the years who think they're running at other young men. They are not. They are running at me. Death in the Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. I really need to reread that book. He fell in October 1918, on a day that was so quiet and still on the whole front that the army report confined itself to the single sentence, "All quiet on the Western Front." He had fallen forward and lay on the earth as though sleeping. Turning him over, one saw that he could not have suffered long. His face had an expression of calm, as though almost glad the end had come. E.M. Remark: "All quiet on the Western Front." She never moved again. Next day, as the Ferris wheel was being taken apart and the race horses were being loaded into vans and the entertainers were packing up their belongings and driving away in their trailers, Charlotte died. The fairgrounds were soon deserted. The sheds and buildings were empty and forlorn. The infield was littered with bottles and trash. Nobody, of the hundreds of people that had visited the fair, knew that a grey spider had played the most important part of all. No one was with her when she died. Charlotte's Web. Man, I haven't read Charlotte's Web in forever, but I remember this was the saddest thing ever. No man is an island, entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a member of thy friends or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never sent to know for whom the bells tolls, it tolls for thee. This is the opening for Whom the Bells Tolls by Ernest Hemingway. It was written by John Donne. It put me in a very intense mood for reading the whole book. Old Dan must have known he was dying. Just before he drew his last breath, he opened his eyes and looked at me. Then with one last sigh, and a feeble thump of his tail, his friendly grey eyes closed forever. After the last shovel of dirt was patted in place, I sat down and let my mind drift back through the years. I thought of the old K.C. baking powder can, and the first time I saw my pups in the box at the depot. I thought of the $50, the nickels and dimes, and the fisherman and blackberry patches. I looked at his grave and, with tears in my eyes, I voiced these words: "You were worth it, old friend, and 1,000 times over, where the red fern grows." Somehow, Kid Me was okay with old Dan's death. The idea of the hero's sacrifice was something I was fine with. It was little and that broke me. She didn't die to save anyone. She just refused to eat without her friend. It was the first time a book had ever made me cry, and I did it privately because I couldn't figure out why I was crying over something that had never been real. His cold eyes stared at me. At last, he said wearily, "I have more faith in Hitler than in anyone else. He alone has kept his promises, all his promises, to the Jewish people. Lev Zil, Night. I will love you forever, whatever happens, till I die and after I die, and when I find my way out of the land of the dead, I'll drift about forever, all my atoms, till I find you again. I'll be looking for you, Will, every moment, every single moment. And when we do find each other again, we'll cling together so tight that nothing and no one will ever tear us apart. Every atom of me and every atom of you. We'll live in birds and flowers and dragonflies and pin trees and in clouds and in those little specks of light you see floating in sunbeams. And when they use our atoms to make new lives, they won't just be able to take one, they'll have to take two. One of you and one of me. We'll be joined so tight. They lay side by side, hand in hand, looking at the sky, the amber spyglass. It probably sounds like soppy bollocks to those who haven't read it, but they are actually talking more literally than it might seem. I cried like a desolate child at the end. It wasn't fair. In Return of the King, when Sam says, "Well, I'm back," I felt like I reached the end of a long journey that I was wholly part of. One last kiss, rushed and clumsy so that they banged cheekbones, and a tear from her eye was transferred to his face. Their two damons kissed farewell, and Pantalaimon flowed over the threshold and up into Lyra's arms. And then Will began to close the window, and then it was done. The way was closed, Lyra was gone, the amber spyglass. That book ruined me. "I miss her," I said before I realized I was speaking. Then I bit it off before I could say anything else. I clenched my teeth and shook my head furiously, like a horse fighting its reins. You can say it, Ori said gently. I shook again, tasted plum, and suddenly the words were pouring out of me. She said I sang before I spoke. She said when I was just a baby she had the habit of humming when she held me. Nothing like a song, just a descending third, just a soothing sound. Then one day she was walking me around the camp, and she heard me echo it back to her, 2 octaves higher, a tiny piping third. She said it was my first song. We sang it back and forth to each other. For years I choked and clenched my teeth. You can say it, Ori said softly. It's okay if you say it. I'm never going to see her again, I choked out. Then I began to cry in earnest. It's okay, Ori said softly. I'm here. You're safe. The Wise Man's Fear, Kingkiller Chronicle Day 2 by Patrick Rothfuss. You have to carry the fire. I don't know how to. Yes you do. Is it real? The fire? Yes it is. Where is it? I don't know where it is. Yes you do. It's inside you. It was always there. I can see it. The Road. Cormac McCarthy. Reading that book was like being slowly crushed to death by a giant stone. I'm cold, Snowden said again in a frail, childlike voice. I'm cold. There. Yossarian said, because he did not know what else to say. There. From Catch-22. That entire book is amazing in how it can go from comedy to horror so quickly. Neighbors bring food with death and flowers with sickness and little things in between. Boo was our neighbor. He gave us 2 soap dolls, a broken watch and chain, a pair of good luck pennies, and our lives. But neighbors give in return. We never put back into the tree what we took out of it. We had given him nothing, and it made me sad. Harper Lee, To Kill a Mockingbird. Can't remember the exact line right now, and I'm not sure where my copy is, but when Atticus is leaving the courtroom, stand up. Your father's passing showed the infinite respect they had for Atticus, even after he lost the case. Go on, said Lenny. How's it gonna be? We gonna get a little place. We'll have a cow, said George, and we'll have maybe a pig and chickens, and down the flat we'll have a little piece alfalfa. For the rabbits, Lenny shouted. For the rabbits, George repeated, of mice and men. This ending was so sad and so powerful. Then she was pressing her little proud broken self against his face, as close as she could get, and then they died. The Subtle Knife. Philip Pullman. Lee Scoresby. This was one of the few parts of any book that made me cry equals. I hope no one who reads this book has been quite as miserable as Susan and Lucy were that night, but if you have been, if you've been up all night and cried till you have no more tears left in you, you will know that there comes in the end a sort of quietness. You feel as if nothing is ever going to happen again. C.S. Lewis. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It may not be intended to be all that sad, but when Marvin dies in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I teared up, I think, Marvin murmured at last, from deep within his corroding rattling thorax. I feel good about it, the lights went out in his eyes for absolutely the very last time ever. It was just moving that the only thing positive Marvin ever said was when he was about to die. You'd feel that way too if your personal philosophy was vindicated after reading God's final message to his creation after living for most likely longer than any deity would have been in existence. Ralph wept for the end of Innocence, the darkness of man's heart, and the fall through the air of the true, wise friend called Piggy, Lord of the Flies. Quasimodo then lifted his eye to look upon the gypsy girl, whose body, suspended from the gibbet, he beheld quivering afar, under its white robes, in the last struggles of death. Then again he dropped it upon the archdeacon, stretched a shapeless mass at the foot of the tower, and he said with a sob that heaved his Victor Hugo, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I carried that line in my heart for several weeks after finishing the book. The entire book was sad, but dang, that line got me. She leaned down and looked at his lifeless face, and Liesl kissed her best friend, Rudy Steiner, soft and true on his lips. He tasted dusty and sweet. He tasted like regret in the shadows of trees and in the glow of the anarchist suit collection. She kissed him long and soft, and when she pulled herself away, she touched his mouth with her fingers. She did not say goodbye. She was incapable, and after a few more minutes at his side, she was able to tear herself from the ground. Everything was beautiful and nothing hurt. From Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. Just the context of that moment makes it so ridiculously heavy. This moment and many others from that book. P.S. Please, if you get the chance, put some flowers on Algernon's grave in the backyard. Daniel Keyes. Flowers for Algernon. After seeing Charlie Gordon's descent back into his former, retarded state, this line just hit so hard. Not a specific line, but the ending to Of Mice and Men really got to me. When Lenny is asking about the rabbits and George shoots him. Tell me again, about the rabbits, George. Augustus Waters was a self-aggrandizing bastard, but we forgive him. We forgive him not because he had a heart as figuratively good as his little one sucked, or because he knew more about how to hold a cigarette than any non-smoker in history, or because he got 18 years when he should have gotten more. 17. Gus corrected. I'm assuming you've got some time, you interrupting bastard. I'm telling you, Isaac continued. Augustus Waters talked so much that he'd interrupt you at his own funeral, and he was pretentious. Sweet Jesus Christ, the kid never took a pee without pondering the abundant metaphorical resonances of human waste production, and he was vain. I do not believe I have ever met a more physically attractive person who was more acutely aware of his own physical attractiveness. But I will say this, when the scientists of the future show up at my house with robot eyes and they tell me to try them on, I will tell the scientists to screw off, because I do not want to see a world without him. I was kind of crying by then. John Green. The Fault in Our Stars. I looked at his grave and, with tears in my eyes, I voiced these words. You were worth it, old friend, and 1,000 times over, where the red fern grows. 4th grade we all cried. In the moment when I truly understand my enemy, understand him well enough to defeat him, then in that very moment I also love him. I think it's impossible to really understand somebody, what they want, what they believe, and not love them the way they love themselves. And then, in that very moment when I love them, I destroy them. Orson Scott Card, Ender's Game. Man, I read this book as a young teenager. I'm pretty sure I had a 1,000-yard stare for a while after reading the ending. It hit me like a truck. On a different note, the passage where the enemy's gate is down made me burst out laughing when he floats right over upside down. The creatures outside looked from pig to man, and from man to pig, and from pig to man again, but already it was impossible to say which was which. Animal Farm by George Orwell. Didn't make me cry, but I was well and truly moved. The time had been when a few kicks from Boxer's hoofs would have smashed the van to matchwood, but alas, his strength had left him, and in a few moments the sound of drumming hoofs grew fainter and died away. I believe there is another world waiting for us, a better world, and I'll be waiting for you there. Robert Frobisher from David Mitchell's Cloud Atlas. Our lives are not our own. From womb to tomb, we are bound to others. With each crime, and every kindness, we birth our future. Jesus frick, that book was incredible. After a while I went out and left the hospital and walked back to the hotel in the rain. Farewell to arms, Ernest Hemingway. Sometimes this quote just comes back to me at the most random of times, and it always makes me a little sad. From Charlotte's Web. No one was with her when she died. I was about 9 and I sobbed and sobbed. It still breaks my heart now to think about it. But you speak of Master Gandalf, as if he was in a story that had come to an end. Yes, we do, said Pippin sadly. The story seems to be going on, but I am afraid Gandalf has fallen out of it. It is really sad, but once I noticed the pun it just never made me feel as bad. From Artemis Fowl, The Opal Deception. He was gone. There was no doubt about it. Even magic could not help him now. Some things are beyond fixing. I cried like a baby. I was 35 for goodness sake, and I still cried when he died. I don't want to say who in case it's a spoiler, or the line just before that when he knows he's going to die. Be well, he said, and then an orange flame blossomed in the center of his chest. God, my eyes are leaking just writing it down. Dang you, Yawn Colfer. I'm a grown man. You can't do that to me. I loved that guy for 4 books. A complex bugger, but for all the right reasons. Then you go and sow that. I always Always cry when Butler dies in the Eternity Code. Every time. The whole time. There are infinite numbers between 0 and 1. There's 0.1 and 0.12 and 0.112 and an infinite collection of others. Of course, there is a bigger infinite set of numbers between 0 and 2, or between 0 and a million. Some infinities are bigger than other infinities. A writer we used to like taught us that there are days, many of them, when I resent the size of my unbounded set. I want more numbers than I'm likely to get. And God, I want more numbers for Augustus Waters than he got. But, Gus, my love, I cannot tell you how thankful I am for our little infinity. I wouldn't trade it for the world. You gave me a forever within the numbered days, and I'm grateful. The line that got me was, the only person I wanted to talk to about Augustus Waters' death was Augustus Waters, because I know that is exactly how I would feel. I sobbed after that book. No, don't cut my hair. Ned loves my hair. Then the steel was at her throat, and its bite was red and cold. This chapter ruined me. I yelled. I cried. I put the book away for a few weeks. Eventually, I read on. You have to read on. Yet what is any ocean but a multitude of drops? I found this line truly inspiring. It's the best answer I've found to why you should pursue justice even if the masses are apathetic. A single individual supporting a social, moral, or environmental cause will never accomplish their goal, but it is possible for a group to do so, and that means every individual counts. Why not be one of them? Cloud Atlas is a fantastic novel. I highly recommend reading it. My analysis of its message isn't nearly eloquent enough to capture its brilliance. This may not have moved me quite to tears, but I found it very powerful. From Stephen King's The Gunslinger, his legs carried him in a sudden leap through the entropy that held him, above the dangling buoy, into a skidding, plunging rush toward the light that offered. The tower frozen on the retina of his mind's eye in a black freeze. Suddenly silence. The silhouette gone. Even the beat of his heart gone as the trestle settled further, beginning its final slow dance to the depths. Tearing loose. His hand finding the rocky, lighted lip of dead 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 lip. Go then. There are other worlds than these. Once on a yellow piece of paper with green lines, he wrote a poem, and he called it Chops, because that was the name of his dog, and that's what it was all about. And his teacher gave him an A and a gold star, and his mother hung it on the kitchen door and read it to his aunts. That was the year Father Tracy took all the kids to the zoo, and he let them sing on the bus, and his little sister was born, with tiny toenails and no hair, and his mother and father kissed a lot, and the girl around the corner sent him a Valentine signed with a row of X's, and he had to ask his father what the X's meant, and his father always tucked him in bed at night, and was always there to do it. Once on a piece of white paper with blue lines, he wrote a poem, and he called it Autumn, because that was the name of the season, and that's what it was all about. And his teacher gave him an A and asked him to write more clearly, and his mother never hung it on the kitchen door because of its new paint, and the kids told him that Father Tracy smoked cigars and left butts on the pews, and sometimes they would burn holes. That was the year his sister got glasses with thick lenses and black frames, and the girl around the corner laughed when he asked her to go see Santa Claus. And the kids told him why. His mother and father kissed a lot, and his father never tucked him in bed at night, and his father got mad when he cried for him to do it. Once on a paper torn from his notebook, he wrote a poem, and he called it Innocence, a question, because that was the question about his girl, and that's what it was all about. And his professor gave him an A and a strange steady look, and his mother never hung it on the kitchen door because he never showed her. That was the year that Father Tracy died, and he forgot how the end of the Apostles' Creed went, and he caught his sister making out on the back porch, and his mother and father never kissed or even talked, and the girl around the corner wore too much makeup that made him cough when he kissed her, but he kissed her anyway because that was the thing to do. And at 3 AM, he tucked himself into bed, his father snoring soundly. That's why on the back of a brown paper bag, he tried another poem, and he called it Absolutely Nothing, because that's what it was really all about. and he gave himself an A and a slash on each damned wrist, and he hung it on the bathroom door because this time he didn't think he could reach the kitchen. The Perks of Being a Wallflower, Stephen Chbosky. This book made me so sad. Neverwhere from Neil Gaiman. First book after the Harry Potter series to make me cry. Spoiler, it's the very last sentence. And they walked away together through the hole in the wall, back into the darkness, leaving nothing behind them, not even the doorway. I freaking wept. I really wanted him to go back. I have never been more happy for a character in my life. From near the end of The Little Prince. It was wrong of you to come. You will suffer. I shall look as if I were dead, and that will not be true. I said nothing. You understand. It is too far. I cannot carry this body with me. It is too heavy. I said nothing. But it will be like an old abandoned shell. There is nothing sad about old shells. I read that book not too long after my grandmother died, and that part just made me think of her, and the waterworks started and I cried for ages. I still tear up when I reread it. Gatsby believed in the green light. The orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms farther, and one fine morning, so we beat on boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. F. Scott Fitzgerald, The Great Gatsby. His count of enchanted objects had decreased by 1. This one hits me like a freight train every time. Cracklin, Tansy and Rollo stood at an upper window overlooking the orchard. Despite the protests of Sister Cicely regarding their condition, the otter Glenna supported Cracklin as she stood at the window and sang. Her sweet voice, which had sounded out in harmony with Picknim's many times before, was now alone. It echoed beautifully off the outer walls until it seemed to fill the entire abbey and its grounds. Fare you well upon your journey to the bright lands far away, where beside the peaceful rivers, you may linger any day, in the forests warm at noontide. See the flowers bloom in the glades. Meet the friends who've gone before you. To the calm of quiet shades, there you'll wait, oh my beloved, never knowing want or care. And when I have seen my seasons, we will walk together there. The Pearls of Luttra, Brian Jakes. Please boss, don't put that thing over my face, he said in a moaning little whisper. Please don't put me in the dark. Don't make me go into the dark. I's afraid of the dark. The last thing John Coffey ever said in The Green Mile. It broke my heart because it really brought out his innocence and childlike demeanor right before he was being killed. Game of Thrones spoilers below. Arya is talking with the boy, Denio, who asks about where she is from. Before she lies to him, she recalls that her father was beheaded, that her brother was murdered, before both he and his direwolf were beheaded and their corpses were desecrated, that her mother's body was mutilated and thrown into a river, and how her other siblings are likely dead. A long time ago, she remembered her father saying that when the cold wind blows the lone wolf dies but the pack survives. He had it all backwards. Arya, the lone wolf, still lived, but the wolves of the pack had been taken and slain and skinned. I remember thinking to myself, if I am a wolf, this is the ultimate humiliation. To be captured and skinned. To be a trophy on someone else's wall. To have the people you love most shamed in the worst possible way. And to have to live with that knowledge for the rest of your life. And she's just a cute little puppy, being forced to experience all of that. Something got stuck in my eye when I read that. Fitting name. It's funny. Most people can be around someone and they gradually begin to love them and never know exactly when it happened. But Ruth knew the very second it happened to her. When IG had grinned at her and tried to hand her that jar of honey. All these feelings that she had been trying to hold back came flooding through her. And it was at that second in time that she knew she loved IG with all her heart. Fanny flag. Fried green tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe. I wish I could love a girl like IG loved Ruth. I wanted so bad reading that felt like breaking. The part in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix when the gang is visiting Arthur in St. Mungo's and run into Neville. His sick mother hands him a paper wrapper and Neville puts it in his pocket cause he feels it's something his mother gave him as a present. Oh, God, it's been so many years. I was almost over it. Children are dying. Lal nodded. That's a succinct summary of humankind, I'd say. Who needs tomes and volumes of history? Children are dying. The injustices of the world hide in those 3 words. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.